Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of What's on My Radar. We have a great episode. This is one of the episodes that I was really looking forward to doing just because I know we get asked a lot of questions about it. I'm always fascinated by it, but I kind of view myself as the expert of what goes on still on the planet Earth, not so much what's going on outside of it. And so for today, I brought in Dr. Mindy Townsend. So we're going to put her in here right now to the show. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Do this, and I mean, what got you into outer space?
Oh gosh, big question. So I'm actually not from here. I'm from Kansas originally, and even if you're living in a city, kind of like Kansas City, Lawrence, Topeka, it doesn't take very long to get outside of the city, and you don't get this effect around here, but it's pretty flat in Kansas, so the sky just goes all the way down to the horizon, and you're just enveloped on all
awesome.
sides. So it's at least for me hard to not just be in awe of the sky and what you can see in it.
Yeah, I can get that for sure. I mean, there's a couple times with us where we get lucky, especially being so close to the Adirondacks, where we can see some cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually where we get a lot of our photos from. And so we always do our best in the weather department to try and identify things, but we're not always the expert.
Mm-hmm.
And so for this episode in particular, I thought this would be a good one for just the average curious person of what they could do to try to differentiate some things as they see them. So can you walk us through what's the difference between a meteor and an asteroid?
Okay, so I will say really very little. So an asteroid, it's, one of these, I'll call them big rocks in space, not as big as planets, but about 3 feet in diameter. They can be rocky or metallic or some sort of mix in between. Sometimes those things, like they'll hit each other and bits will chip off. And those smaller bits we tend to call meteoroids. So I differentiated from meteor, you get the oid at the end, so it's in space with asteroids. But the meteoroid is kind of what's flying through space, and every once in a while, those will hit a planet, they'll fall through the atmosphere, and a meteor is actually technically a meteoroid kind of in the process of going through the atmosphere. So it's that big bright streak in the sky. And then once it hits the ground, that's, of course, a meteorite. But I kind of think they're mostly the same type of thing, a space rock.
Yeah, I can get that. It's made of the same material, just in a different spot, more or less.
Yeah, exactly,
is what we're going with.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So can you actually help differentiate this one too? We always get questions sometimes. We have a lot of meteor showers.
Mm-hmm.
Where are the different names for those meteor showers coming from?
That's a great question. It actually comes from where the meteor shower appears to come from. We call it the radiant. So you'll have like the Perseids will seem to come from the constellation Perseus. And it's a rough estimate, right? Like if you find the actual stars, it's kind of in that general area. So the Orionids, they come from the constellation Orion. Gemini from Gemini.
Well, that's good to know. I think not a lot of people knew that one. So that's actually really cool to...
Yeah, and that's really helpful to figure out where to look in the sky.
Yeah.
You can go on some sort of like atlas, figure out where the constellation is and look in that direction.
Yeah. What is... Here's another thing, too, that I know that people always end up looking for, and then we'll get pictures for this, too. I always end up identifying a lot of Starlink satellites over our region because of that unique line formation that we get. So for the average person looking up, what's something that they can know when they look to spot a satellite, or if they're looking for maybe the International Space Station? Do you have any tips for them or how to kind of know what's going on up there?
So luckily, we've basically know where every satellite is. Like ideally, unless something's gone horribly wrong, we know where they are. So for the International Space Station, there is actually a NASA website and an app called Spot the Station, and it will tell you kind of where to, like based on your location, where to look at what time. If you're lucky with that, you might see something called an iridium flare, and that is when the satellite is kind of tilted relative to the sun in just the right way. So it kind of looks like a really long-lasting meteor in the sky. It's a really bright flash. As far as just other satellites, I don't do a lot of tracking of that on my own, but I know
Yeah.
people who really like to use the app called Orbit Track.
Okay.
It's something you can download on your iPhone or Android phone, and it can tell you the locations of a variety of satellites. And you can always kind of tell them because they look like stars in the sky when you're
Yeah.
watching them moving. Stars don't
Yeah, we
usually
get a
look
lot
like
of
that.
videos of going, oh, look, it's a shooting star or things like that. And you're like, nah, just
Yeah.
from the way that looks, I can't personally clarify it as that. Most likely, more often than not, it's a satellite. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is still cool.
Yeah, it's still very cool. Yeah, don't get me wrong. That's why I'm like, it's always Starlink, almost always. Recently, with
Yeah.
the two different lines going, you're like, those are Starlinks. But yeah,
Those are very noticeable. Yeah.
very noticeable for sure. We actually just had a viewing of this recently, Aurora Borealis. Do you have any tips for people to try and see that? And I know it can get a little bit confusing for the average person when they start talking about the geomagnetic levels in the atmosphere and what that means for us. So if you can clarify in any way, that'd be awesome.
I will do my best.
Yeah.
So, to view them, we'll start off with that. I mean, sometimes when they're really strong, I missed the most recent one, but the one before that, I was actually really surprised to see them with just unaided eye.
Yeah.
But it was really effective to just get out my phone camera and take a picture, and it really caught like the colors, and it looked really
Yeah.
beautiful. As far as like how they happen, so the sun is always kind of spewing what we call solar wind, and it's basically just charged particles. It's protons, it's electrons, just streaming out through space, and this is happening all the time. And what happens is the Earth is nice and protected by a magnetic field. So we're not ourselves in a lot of danger from this radiation coming from the sun, but those electrons will interact with the magnetic field and accelerate and become more energized. And then those electrons will collide with oxygen and nitrogen in the atmosphere, and it will produce those really pretty colors.
Yeah.
I think oxygen is responsible for the green aurora and nitrogen for the purple pink. I would
Believe
check
you're right.
that. I'm pretty sure that's right, but I
I
would check
think
it.
you're right. We have a graphic in our weather office that has the different colors based off the
Mhm.
chem. And I believe what you're saying is correct. Yeah. So I'm
Okay,
going to back
great.
you up on this one.
All
Yeah.
right, perfect. We should be looking for more of these. Like, there's no guarantee that we will get these aurora this far south, but um, there's something that the sun will do every once in a while called a coronal mass ejection. And these are just like giant burps of plasma that come from
Yeah.
the sun, and they're associated with increased sunspot activity. And so the sun is on an 11-year sunspot cycle. We are entering what's known as solar maximum right now, where we'll
Okay.
have like, the biggest and like the most sunspots that we'll get in this cycle. And it's been more active than a lot of astronomers have predicted. So that is one of the reasons that we're seeing such like robust aurora so far south. And we have a good chance of seeing even more of that as the cycle goes on.
That's exciting to hear, especially for a lot of folks who miss out on them. I have had so many opportunities to try and see them, and
Mhm.
I've missed them every time, and it's so disappointing. So this is good to hear. I'm gonna tell my wife this too. We're gonna be excited. We're gonna start to go look for these for sure.
Great.
So thank you for telling us of that part for sure. Is it typically like you look low on the horizon, or does that really matter necessarily?
Um, I don't know that it does. I don't have a lot of experience personally with aurora, but
Yeah.
the last time I saw them, there were some overhead, there were
Yeah.
some on the horizon. Um, you just kind of have to look all over. I think it's.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like when you think of it, you think of places like the North Pole or Alaska
Mhm.
or Iceland, and like you see
Right.
those viral videos where they have the camera like directly over their head, and then they pan
Mhm.
down. And it's everywhere, and it's cool. And then here, yeah, we definitely don't have it as good as that. So it's a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
harder
yeah.
to find. So that's good. That's still
Mhm.
good to know. It's most likely you just gotta look, and then once you
Yeah.
find it, you're good to go,
Mhm.
which is good. Any tips for people who maybe want to do some stargazing, trying to find where some planets are, or maybe some good constellations?
Right. So fall is my favorite time to do observing. It starts to get dark a little bit earlier. I am not a night owl, which surprises a lot of people. I like to be cozy in my bed by like 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So if I can do some observing before, then that's better. But this is planet time, right? You're going to see Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are all up at various times. Um, and they're of course going to move across the sky, so it's probably best to use like an almanac, maybe even, or my
Okay.
favorite type of kind of observing planning software is called Stellarium. You can
Okay.
actually download the software or use it in the browser, and you can just search for what you want to look for, and you can project it into the future if you're planning for like a week or in
That's awesome.
advance. Yeah, it's great. um, how I kind of orient myself in the sky is I'll tell you like my deep shame. I'm very bad at finding constellations.
Oh, that's okay. I feel like I can only point out like two. I can find Orion usually if I'm lucky, and then I
Yes.
still can't tell if I found the Big Dipper or the Small Dipper half the time.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I can always find the Big Dipper. And so that's how I always orient myself. And that's also a really great one because it never sets. It's up all year round, unlike
Yeah.
Orion, which is not up all year round.
Right.
And that's, of course, you're facing north, and so that can kind of help orient you in the sky. And you can then kind of hop to different constellations from there, which you can look at, find by using a planisphere. It's basically kind of a star map, and you can
Okay.
print these out for free online. You could pay to have like a nice one that's laminated, but you don't have to do that. You can just print one out online.
Yeah.
They're everywhere and free. So that's kind of how I would start.
I
It can
like
be
that.
kind of overwhelming. What I would do is like pick something you want to see and plan that out. Don't just go out there without a plan in the hopes that something will reveal itself to you.
Okay.
That's how I started out, and that is not successful.
Yeah, I bet that could be a little challenging. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, I know too, you also work at the Dudley Observatory. So can you talk about some of the programs you have there? Obviously, is it open to the public? Do you have anything to help them, the average stargazer, try to enhance their experience?
Right. So Dudley Observatory has recently kind of partnered with Siena College. So actually, we operate now outside or out of Siena College.
Okay.
So we don't have like an actual like telescope and observatory. Siena itself has the Braille Observatory, which is amazing. Everyone should go to their open houses when they can have them when the weather is good. But as far as what we do, I will go out and give public lectures sometimes, activities for kids, some ongoing programming. We sponsor a lecture series and star party at the Octagon Barn in Knox.
Okay.
We bring in, space experts from the area, and they give really fascinating talks. And then, if the weather is good, people bring their telescopes out, and we do a little observing. It's far enough out of town where it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Our full schedule for that is on dudleyobservatory.org, our website. September 14th is also Observe the Moon Night, so I'm working with the Siena College Astronomy Club to do a small observing event on the campus of Siena. We'll bring out some telescopes to the quad and look at the moon and have some moon activities, and the public is welcome to come to that as well.
Oh, that's
I'm
cool.
also working with CAPSI, which is a local nonprofit run completely by volunteers to actually bring science on tap back to Troy. And so we're going to bring in just different experts, not strictly astronomy, but a lot of different science disciplines. Our October event, it's free, but every seat has been, or our September event, every seat has been claimed at this point. It's free, but we'll have one in October and November. So I would keep an eye out for that as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. Sounds like a lot of fun. I know I'll ask you this last question because you brought it up, and if you don't know, that's okay. You mentioned bringing out telescopes. If anybody wants to go out and buy one, like what's a good beginner telescope?
Right. So the place I usually send people recently went out of business. It
Oh
was
no.
Orion. They make great telescopes. But actually, what I would do, libraries around here often have telescopes that they will lend out to you. I know that the Guilderland Public Library
Okay.
has a telescope. I would go try that out first. Also, go to maybe a local astronomy club. Everyone there, at least in my experience, always wants to show you their telescope, and you
Yeah.
are free to go ask questions of these people, try out their telescopes. And don't turn your nose up at actual binoculars. You can see the Pleiades really well with binoculars. So there's lots of options for you to try out
Yeah.
before you buy.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's really good advice. And Mindy, thank you again for taking the time to talk with us. We appreciate it.
No
Hopefully,
problem.
we'll see you out and about soon at one of these events here at Channel 13 for sure. So I appreciate taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good one. And with this as well, too, I mentioned this was an exciting episode for us here, where there's a couple of things that I'm really excited about. And one in particular is, do you guys know in this area we actually have 2 astronauts currently enrolled through NASA from this area with ties to this area? So we have astronaut Stephanie Wilson, who went to Taconic High School, and astronaut Reid Wiseman, who went to RPI. And joining us for the first part of this here, for an interview here, astronauts obviously very busy with their schedules as they train to go up into outer space, so I couldn't get them together. But joining me now for the first part of this, we have astronaut Reid Wiseman.
I can't believe I'm talking to another Reid.
Oh, I was thinking the same thing, man.
That's
I was
crazy.
like, plus to have it spelled the same way is a rarity in and of itself. I don't know how many other Reids you've ever met in your life. I've met
It
one.
is few, but it's becoming more and more common now.
Yeah.
You look like you got at least a decade of youth on me, but it is becoming more common, especially down in Texas where I live. There's a lot out there.
Usually it's a lot of EEDs is what I usually see when I meet people.
I'm seeing more EIDs, but I think it's just a local Texas thing.
What advice would you give to kids from the capital region with similar aspirations to be like you one day? And then any message you'd like to share with the people of RPI?
Advice to kids and RPI messages. I'll start with the advice.
Yeah.
I think Stephanie probably gave similar advice, but the biggest thing I could say to anyone is just find what you're passionate about and go all in and try to find a thing that you love doing and that kind of comes naturally to you. And that might be engineering. You might want to be a doctor. That might be flying airplanes. That might be being a nurse or a school teacher or a police officer. All those things. Just find that thing that ignites your passion and go all in. And then the other side of that for me personally is get outside and enjoy the natural beauty of planet Earth. I think there's no substitute for going on a hike or doing something with a couple of friends and experiencing that side of life. I think that is the recipe. Basically, that is the recipe that I like. For my fellow students over at RPI, the thing I would say is it's a hard school. It's supposed to be hard, and it is preparing you for the next phase of your journey, which is your professional career. So it is teaching you how to fail and get back up. I call it failure resistance. It's also giving you an amazing foundational education that no matter what you do for the rest of your life, you have that diploma from RPI and you can fall back on that education. And I think it just sets you on a wonderful trajectory for your professional life.
Reid, what were some of your favorite parts of the capital region when you were here?
I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and sometimes you got to leave your hometown to realize the beauty of it. And I just think that area of Albany is absolutely beautiful. That area of New York, that area of our country, the trees, the rolling hills. I loved getting up to Saratoga Springs. I loved going down into Troy, New York. I loved Albany, just being outside, exploring the natural wonders around you. And then you can jump in a car and go to Boston. You can go to New York City. It is such a neat place. And there's so much history up there, history of our nation, but also history of our earth. And I think it's one of the most beautiful places, especially when you get into October and the leaves are changing and golly days. It's just, I miss that big time.
Yeah, it's always one of my favorite things to do is right in the middle of fall, drive right up into the Adirondacks, right through the highway. You just get the color change and yeah, you're set.
I didn't even touch on Finger Lakes. Like there's just so many, drive over to Vermont and do some skiing. There's just so many wonderful things to do up there.
It's a great spot. Reid, when did you know you wanted to become an astronaut? How rigorous was the training?
I didn't know that I wanted to be an astronaut as a kid, but then I just ran into one of my friends that I had when I was in elementary school, and he said I used to always talk about it. And I don't remember really that. I remember the Challenger disaster. I was in elementary school, and Krista McAuliffe was on that mission. And I just remember the whole nation mourning. I remember my school teachers mourning, my parents mourning. And I think that kind of started me on, wow, they were doing something grand and they were trying to do something that few humans have done. And I think that sort of sparked my interest. I also love building models, airplanes, trains. I built a space shuttle model. So I just was really into that. I was into trains, heavy machinery, construction equipment, farm equipment, airplanes. And I think that just started to build on it as I went through my life. It started to build on each phase of my life. Went to RPI, majored in engineering, and that is where I sort of fell in love with math and the way, math and calculus and physics all fit together. To me, it was beautiful. And I'd never really liked math that much in high school, but then in college, it all started to come together. And I wanted to go fly airplanes in the military. I ended up choosing the Navy. Had a little bit of a time when I wanted to go in the Air Force, but chose the Navy. And as I started flying airplanes in the Navy, I really loved that. And to me, astronaut was putting all of those pieces of the puzzle together for me and going and exploring off of our planet. So I was lucky to get into the astronaut office. I always just thought it was an unattainable dream, and it was amazing for me when that worked out.
That's awesome. How rigorous was your training? Really, was it like a lot of? I know, like whenever I reached out for you guys, they're like, "Oh, they're in a very big training regimen." So how rigorous is it?
I did. I forgot the second half of your question. So thanks for coming back to the training. When you first get selected as an astronaut, there's 2 years where you're doing the fundamental astronaut training. And although I'd say the training is difficult, the system is not here to weed you out. The system is here to make you successful. We all come into the astronaut as professionals, and they really want to just teach you the basics of flying a spacecraft. What do you do when things go wrong? How do you operate the robotic arm on the space station, which is a very complicated machine? How do you do spacewalking? We also fly with Russians, so we have to learn Russian language. And I would say when you integrate all that together, it's complex on your mind because you're doing something different and something intense every single day. But the pace of life is manageable, and you got weekends free, and you're usually home at night with your family. So I think it is all manageable, but the diversity of what you're trying to learn is what I always find to be the biggest challenge. But it's also very rewarding because every day is something different, and you rarely get bored. So that's a pretty neat part of the job.
Yeah, I can tell. So what's it like in outer space, and what keeps bringing you back?
Outer space is magical. When you really just boil all of it down, there's no substitute for looking back at planet Earth from 250 miles above it. And on the International Space Station, where I spent 6 months, we're only 250 miles off the surface of the planet. And that, an airliner is 6 miles up, and you know that view. So we're 250 miles up. But it's not like you look out the window and see this little tiny Earth and the black of space, but you do see the curvature of the Earth, and you do see it against the black of space. And like, for instance, at night when you come over the east coast of the United States on the International Space Station, you can see from about Boston down to Miami. That's about the swath of the Earth that you see from horizon to horizon. But that is magnificent. You can see the ribbon of I-95 going all the way down the East Coast with the traffic, and you just see it as a strip of light, but you can see it and you relate to it. The Great Lakes almost touched the Chesapeake Bay, and it took me forever to get my mind wrapped around the scale that I was looking at. Because to me, the Great Lakes and the Chesapeake Bay, that's an 8-hour car ride away. But when you look down in space, they're almost touching, and you just kind of get your head wrapped around that. So looking at our Earth is magical. And then you don't feel the effects of gravity, so you're floating. So anything on Earth that's hard up there is easy. You can move a refrigerator with your finger. But anything on Earth that's easy in space, when you remove gravity, seems to be hard, like eating a bag of M&Ms or looking for a particular bolt in a bag of bolts. Those sorts of tasks, they become so menial and difficult that it's very frustrating. So it's just new challenges. You're exercising your body in a totally different way. And then you're doing it with this awesome team of people. You've got a few astronauts that you're in space with, and you're all in the same operational mindset, the same goals, but then you have a broad team on the ground, and that team includes the mission controllers in Houston and around the world. It includes your family. It includes the vehicle that built the rocket, the people who built the rocket, the people who built the space station. And when you look at all that, the scientists operating, some of my favorite moments in space were talking to the scientists because I was operating their research. That's a long answer, but it's wild. I mean, it is so cool to be off the planet and working every day for 6 months.
Yeah, I can't even imagine it. This is one thing I even told Stephanie this too, which was if I couldn't do weather, I like my parents took me, we went to the Kennedy Space Center once, and I was like, I would do this if I had a chance. Yeah, but it's cool.
1986 for me. That is what my parents and my grandparents took me by Kennedy, and we really just drove through. And that is all burned in my mind.
Yep.
I love that place.
I was like a kid in a candy store. It was so fun. Yeah.
Same.
So describe the Artemis 2 mission for me, how significant it is. What's the crew going to be doing? What's your role specifically going to be on this mission?
Artemis 2 it's a fascinating mission. I'll try to keep this fairly brief, but we are going to the moon. We're not going to land. We're just going to go to the moon, go around it, and come home. It's 250,000 miles from Earth to the moon on average. So it's going to take us about 4 days to get there and about 4 days to get back. We will launch on a very large rocket called the Space Launch System, and we will be riding in a Lockheed Orion spacecraft on top of that. It's a capsule, looks a lot like standard Apollo era spacecraft. We will launch out of Kennedy Space Center. We'll do one quick lap of planet Earth, about a 90-minute orbit of Earth. We'll have an amazing view, 1,000 miles above the planet, and we'll check out all the spacecraft systems there on just a very high-level checkout. If everything is looking good, and primarily the thing we're most worried about is our environmental control and life support systems, because we'll be the first humans to fly on this vehicle. If everything looks good, we're going to raise our orbit up to 38,000 miles for a 24-hour orbit of Earth. So at about 9,000 miles, Earth out the window is about the size of a basketball. So Earth will be getting smaller and smaller. We'll go out to 38,000 miles, and we have 24 hours to check out this spacecraft through and through. If anything is going wrong, we'll just come home from that orbit. But if everything looks really good, we'll burn our thrusters on our European service module, and that will send us out to the moon. Like I said, 4 days out, 4 days back. And in that process, we will be checking out every system on Orion as the first crew to fly it, completely with the mentality of getting it ready for our friends who will fly on Artemis 3, dock with a SpaceX human lander, and try to go to the surface of the moon. Hopefully not too long after we fly Artemis 2. So in a nutshell, that's our mission. My role is the commander of the crew. I'm flying with an amazing, very talented crew. Victor Glover is a seasoned astronaut with me on this mission. Christina Cook has a year in space and 6 spacewalks under her belt. Also a outstanding engineer. And then Jeremy Hansen, who's been a friend of mine since we both got hired in 2009, a Canadian astronaut. So it's a very senior crew. And our goal is just to check this vehicle out end to end and be ready to roll for our friends on Artemis 3.
Now, how does this work exactly? Is this something that gets assigned to you, or do they just like kind of list all the missions up and you kind of like try to push for the one that you want and just keep your fingers crossed that you get it?
We all joke that you want the next mission. That's what every astronaut wants, is the next mission. And so, I think we all just want the next mission. And some of my friends who I would regard as the finest astronauts I've ever met are heading to the space station in 2 years, and then they'll circle back and hopefully they'll fly something to the moon or they'll go back to the space station. But all of our missions right now are pretty intense and they're all valuable. So I would say if you line them all up on a wall, I think can't really say that they're all even, but they're all pretty much even. But people have their things that they want to do. We're about to launch Don Pettit on a Russian spacecraft here in about a month, and that man just wants to go to space for as long as humanly possible. So he's doing 6 to 8 months on the International Space Station, and he's happy as a clam.
That's awesome. How does it feel though? Because I know it's been a little while since we've had somebody go back around the moon. How does it feel to be one of the first 4 to go back around?
Truly, it's magnificent. I still can't believe that it's real. It's like the dream of being an astronaut. You never really think it's real until you're there. And I just can't wait to go fly with these 3 other folks around the moon. We haven't been out to the moon since 1972. No human has been to the moon since 1972 when Apollo 17 left the surface of the moon. And it will be awesome to get back there. The thing that has kind of shocked me is there's no ticker tape parade in New York, but there's been a tremendous amount of support from Apollo era astronauts who have called us on the phone just with extreme excitement that they almost feel like we're continuing their legacy. Now we've done long duration space missions in low Earth orbit on the International Space Station with the space shuttle. And now it feels like it's the right time to go get back into deep space, get out to the moon, get onto Mars. So to be the first step in that, I think for us, it's just wonderful. We love it.
That's awesome. I know obviously you've been up to space for a little bit of time. What's something you always want to make sure you're bringing with you when you go into space?
Oh boy. There's a lot of things that you probably think you want. I loved having a picture of my family. Family's very important to me.
Yep.
And then also I've realized something that's important to me is tradition. And so this is going to be a little bit of a weird answer. I've never given it before, but on the weekends with my kids, when they were younger, we would make waffles on Saturday or Sunday morning. Like that was just a thing that we fell into. And on the International Space Station, we have little waffles. They're pre-made, and we have some strawberries and syrup. And so on Saturday mornings, I made it a habit to get up in the morning and I would warm up some waffles and I would go into the cupola with this amazing view of Earth. And I would eat some strawberry waffles and think about my family. Like those connections when you're away from Earth they're really, really important. Another thing that we did while we were up there was for science. But Dr. Steve Swanson, an astronaut that I was up with, he grew lettuce in this little plant habitat, and I underestimated seeing something green from planet Earth growing in space against kind of that stark environment of the International Space Station. It was way more impactful than I expected it to be. So if I ever had an opportunity to go to Mars or leave for a long time, just having some flowers you grow or some plants you grow and have that capability to eat that was incredible. Weird answers, but connection to home, connection to life back on Earth is far more important than I expected it to be.
No, those aren't weird answers at all. I like that actually. It's a cool one with the plant one. I didn't think of that one either myself. So, describe for me what it's like living on the ISS. What's the daily routine?
Daily routine is hard. It's a 7-day work week. The mission control will try to give us a little bit of a break on Saturday and Sunday just to let us relax a touch because we're up there for 6 months or a year. And so you do need a little time off. But if I really broke down space station life, I would break it into thirds. 1/3 of the time is spent working on your body. So running on the treadmill, lifting weights, you have to maintain your physical conditioning because without gravity, your body immediately starts to decay when you're in space. So 1/3 of it is spent just keeping your body healthy. And then 1/3 of it really is doing research on your own body. So we do a lot of scientific research on the human body as we're in space. And then in line with that is doing all the other experiments for researchers down on Earth that we do. And that takes up the bulk of our time. And then the last third of it really is just doing maintenance, either corrective maintenance or primarily preventative maintenance. The space station has been in orbit around Earth since the year 2000. That's mind-blowing, 24 years, and it's still in magnificent shape all the way around. I was shocked when I got up there in 2014, just how good everything looked. The equipment was in great shape, and that's a testament not only to the engineers who designed this, but to the crews that have inhabited the space station. We really treat it like a national laboratory, like a national treasure, and it's in good shape. So maintaining that spacecraft takes a tremendous amount of our time. And then you fill in the gaps of that with the human nature side. We have a phone, you can call your family. Looking out the window, there's no substitute for looking out the window. I especially liked Sunday mornings when we would have nothing on the schedule and you could map out your orbital trajectory and you would know where you're about to fly over for the next few hours. And you could really pick out some sites that you love, like the Hudson River, RPI. I got a photograph of that. You could get London every now and then, or Paris, or go over Mount Etna in Italy, and just the different things you could pick out where it was that was some of my most fond memories.
That's awesome. Is it big, ISS? How big would you say it is? I mean, obviously it's big because it's got
everything is weird. You can use every surface. So there's no floor, there's no ceiling because you don't have to worry about gravity. So it becomes actually very, very large. They say it's about the size of a 747 or a 5-bedroom house. If you have a crew of 3 up there, you can go the entire day and maybe see somebody once or twice. So it's fairly long. It's narrow. None of the rooms are large, but it is fairly long. And then we have different laboratories going off, different nodes of the space station. But I never felt claustrophobic. I never felt like I got to get out of here. It was very comfortable living up there.
Nice. What's one of the biggest misconceptions you had going into space?
Oh, there's a lot of misconceptions going into space. We train a tremendous amount. And then when you remove gravity and you're up there for real, 240, 250 miles off the surface of planet Earth, the view trips you up every single time because it just stops you in your tracks. It's so gorgeous. I expected it to look like pictures, but it doesn't. It's so much more beautiful than a picture can do it justice when you're looking with your own brain and your own eyes. But really being weightless, that feeling of floating is way harder than I expected it to be. And it takes a lot of time. You make a lot of mistakes. You lose everything. Like you think putting your car keys down at home is tough. When you remove gravity, just like the first week that you're up there, every single thing is confusing and difficult and sometimes painful, and you feel a little sick and your head feels full, and your body is not used to it. And then you get in the groove and you start to cherish it. But removing gravity, I think, is the most unexpected. It's coming, but it is a weird thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. I like that. What's doing a spacewalk like? Were you scared your first one?
Fear is an interesting thing that I've had enough moments in my life of things that are acutely scary, like launching on a rocket or flying a jet into combat or going on a spacewalk, that I think I'm more scared before the event than I am when the event is occurring. And so the fear of anticipation building up to the event is definitely more intense than the event itself. Going out on my first spacewalk, I had trouble sleeping for 2 or 3 days before I went out. But as soon as I opened that hatch, it felt very inviting. I was not scared, and I'm pretty scared of heights. Being on a tall mountain is scary. Being on the side of a skyscraper for me is basically impossible to walk up to the edge. But going out on a spacewalk, it was not at all that way. I felt very comfortable outside the space station. What I didn't expect is how physically and mentally exhausting it is. And it's hitting the extreme on both of those dimensions. When you come in, you are mentally 100% spent, and at the same time, physically 100% spent. And the only thing you want to do is go to bed. Like, that is all I want to do. After my first spacewalk, I wanted to go home. I was like, all right, I've done that. That was hard enough. I'm ready to go home. But then you sleep and you feel better. And when I went out for my second spacewalk, I was much more comfortable outside, but I came in just completely 100% exhausted.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what it's like to just have the ISS be your guide and that's it around you.
I do have to share, like, when you are out there, the view is spectacular when you get a second to look, and you just have that one visor that's keeping you safe from the vacuum of space. I distinctly remember 2 moments on my second spacewalk where I was working hard, and like through my hands and the tools I was working with, I saw Earth, and we were over the Mediterranean, and I just saw the island of Crete, going past me. And Crete is like a very long rectangle.
Yeah.
And so I just looked down, I'm like, oh, there's Crete. And then you go right back to doing your work. And then a few orbits later, because you orbit the Earth once every 90 minutes, and a spacewalk is about 7 hours long. So you're outside for a long time. And I remember it's kind of the same situation, and we're coming up over Chile, and I look down and I go, oh, there's a volcano erupting. And then you kind of go right back to work. And like, who on planet Earth could ever dream of such things? But it's wild. It is wild when you have those little tiny human moments of just enjoying where you are.
Yeah. I got 2 more questions for you, Reid, I think, which is, what is your favorite thing about space? What is your least favorite thing about space?
Is that 2 questions or is that 1 question?
That is your 2 question, I think.
I have to be completely selfish and be honest. And my favorite thing about space is looking at Earth. It's just, you just can't grasp how gorgeous that is. I really wish everybody would get that opportunity in their life to see that. I really loved looking down at planet Earth. I loved all the other things that I went into. Working with the team is amazing. The researchers, floating is incredible, but nothing beats seeing Earth against the blackness of space. My least favorite thing, I will again be very honest, but going to the bathroom, it's just never easy in space. Everything about it is awkward. It doesn't matter what you're doing in there. It's just awkward. Our body likes to go to the bathroom with gravity, and when you take it away, it doesn't do so well.
No, that's fair. I like that a lot. That's a good answer. I like that a lot. Stephanie said her least favorite was not being able to bring her family with her.
Yeah, she's been up there 3 times, and it would be. I joked when I was up there. I wish I could just bring like a 10-year-old kid, because their brains are so adaptive and their body is so nimble. They're so creative that the things that were taking me months to figure out, they would have just been figuring out
Like 2
like
seconds.
clockwork. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, Rita, again, thanks for taking the time, man. Being that I'm sure you don't want confusion at NASA, I'll hold off on applying so that there's only one Rita in the program. Again,
That's great.
yeah. But no, seriously, it's been an honor. It's been very cool. Good luck with your mission. It sounds awesome.
Thanks, Reid. And I look forward to talking to you again. So let's not make this a one and done.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Maybe when you come back, we could do something. I'll follow you right now on Twitter, so that way you know it's me. And then
all right, Astro_Reid. The other one I think is a cat. So make sure you're on Astro_Reid.
Gotcha.
All right, man. Cheers. I'll look up Radar Reid as well.
I gotcha. Very nice to meet you. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Likewise.
Such a cool guy. Also got to mention, very cool to talk to another guy named Reid one more time at least, because, I mean, spelled the same way, that's just very rare. We also mentioned that we have another astronaut with ties to this region, and that would be Stephanie Wilson. When we caught up with her, she's scheduled to go on the Falcon 9 Crew 9 rocket launch up to the ISS on September 24th. But as we now know, with Boeing Starliner and those 2 astronauts stuck up there, 2 of those seats had to be emptied, and Stephanie's was one of them. So in this interview, we touched on her mission role that she would have had if she was at the space station. So just keep that part in mind as you listen.
Again, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. I appreciate that. And if you can just talk to me a little bit about, when did you know you wanted to become an astronaut? How rigorous is the training?
Yes, I had the good fortune of taking a career awareness class at Crosby Junior High School, and I was asked to interview someone who worked in an interesting career field, and I was interested in astronomy at the time. I talked to a professor at Williams College and was fascinated by his work. I really wanted then to do something in astronomy or space related. I also had an interest in engineering and understanding how devices work. I eventually decided to study engineering in college, and then went on to work on launch vehicles and robotic spacecraft. And the transitioning to human spaceflight was really a natural transition for me. Having had the chance to work on the Galileo spacecraft and on the Titan IV launch vehicle, I really wanted a chance to have an opportunity to fly aboard a spacecraft and a rocket. And but that interest really started back in junior high school when I was talking to the astronomy professor from Williams College.
That's awesome. Good for you. So how rigorous would you say your training is
It is. It's very interesting. It's certainly doable, though. We have a great team of instructors and trainers here at the Johnson Space Center that will train us on the systems. We also have trainers for our science and the research, and all of that is very doable if one has a strong ethic for studying and has a great propensity for learning. It is certainly doable. All of it is prepared for us as we do generic training and also the mission specific training once we are flight assigned.
Very cool. Obviously this is well, you said, I believe, if I'm mistaken, you can correct me, it's your 4th time going into space.
It is.
Can you tell me what it's like and what keeps bringing you back? What makes you keep wanting to go back up?
Oh, I love the opportunity to be part of a space mission or a space program. The ride on the rocket is spectacular. It's unbeatable. If you remember how we used to describe rides at Disney as an e-ticket ride, it's an e-ticket ride for sure. And it is a wonderful opportunity really to do many things, to have a chance to be a researcher in microgravity, have a chance to look back at Earth and really to appreciate the beauty of Earth. That is why I continue and want to go back every time. The training is spectacular. Having a chance to ride a rocket is phenomenal. And then being part of the larger mission objectives to be able to do my portion to make sure that we are continuing the science and returning all of the technology, the advances that we make back to Earth and back to our everyday lives is really a special opportunity and a special contribution.
Yeah, that's great. Can you talk a little bit more about what your role will be specifically on this mission?
I, as part of the Crew 9 crew, I'm a mission specialist for the launch and free flight phase until we are docked and joined to the International Space Station. As part of being a mission specialist, I support the commander and the pilot through the phases of flight, work with the stowage on the vehicle and help to keep everything tidy and help them exchange components or whatever items that they might need from stowage. I will gather for them. Once we dock to the International Space Station, we will join Expedition 71 and become flight engineers, doing the research and the working with the systems and the components on the International Space Station. Shortly after we arrive, there will be a transition in Soyuz crews, and we will join Soyuz 72 and then become Expedition 72. And then again, continue as flight engineers for the work aboard the International Space Station with our research and our systems.
Awesome. I know they mentioned things that you guys always bring up with you to outer space. What is one thing that every time you go, I have to take this with me?
I, in addition to taking pictures of family and friends, like to take a memento, something that's special to my family. And actually, it changes. I will have somebody prepare a small gift, something that I can take from my family that's meaningful to my family, and then I can return it. And often it's a surprise, and so they will have it stowed for me, and then I'll find it on board with the bags that have been flown for us and pre-positioned prior to our flight. So I'm looking forward to learning what that small trinket might be.
That's pretty sweet. I like that. That's pretty unique to think of that. That's awesome. What is a common misconception that you would say for outer space? I know a lot of people down here obviously haven't experienced what it's like up there. What do you think is a common misconception? What was one thing that really shocked you your first time up there?
Let's see, one thing that really shocked me. Well, one thing that's surprising is, well, and also beautiful, is the transitions from day to night. And so as the sun rises or sets, we experience all of the colors of the rainbow through that transition. And then if we are doing operations, say robotic operations in darkness, and there's not a moon, it is especially dark. So what surprised me was how much light the moon actually gave, being, of course, lit by the sun, but how much having a moon can actually help us when we're doing robotic operations and having the ability to be able to clear either the arm or a spacewalker on the arm or a component at the end of the arm. And that was something that really surprised me because, of course, here on Earth, moon, although even when it is out, it does provide some light, but it's not so appreciable. And it was very appreciable on orbit.
Yeah, that's certainly something I never would have thought of. That's funny. How long would you say it takes you to reacclimate coming back down to Earth? Are there times where you're used to things floating, you go to let go of a pen and it just goes, or you think it goes pretty quick?
For the reacclimation, after 2 weeks on the space shuttle, it did go very quickly. And that phenomenon that you mentioned does happen for a day or so where you remember that you were floating something and you're on Earth now. And so it's not going to stay where you left it. But your ability to walk and to ascend stairs and to sort of change your momentum and go around a corner comes back very, very quickly. Probably the first 80% or so returns within the first few days, and you work another week or so to recover the additional 20%, another week or two. For a long duration mission for 6 months, it really does take quite a bit longer. When we return after we splash down, you will see that although many people can walk, they want us to be safe, and so they will transition us onto seats and move us about so that we are not walking initially. Sometimes people are feeling nauseous or a little bit dizzy, and so that happens for a day or two. And then we also are working with our strength and conditioning team to help us regain our strength and conditioning, and they will work with us for the hand-eye coordination and help us to begin doing cardio work on earth and also weightlifting. And so that we work with them for about 45 days. And it takes the better part of that, over a week or two. Most of it returns, and then it takes that additional 30 days really to regain and get back to where you were before flight.
What's your favorite thing about outer space and least favorite thing?
My favorite thing about outer space is really thinking about what the future holds for us. All of this work that we're doing in low Earth orbit is wonderful research. And as my colleague said, we have the opportunity to be researchers and also to be subjects of that research. And it lays the foundation for the work that we will be doing in deep space and helps with technology demonstration for our lunar missions. That is very exciting. And so I love that aspect of it. And I would say there's not really anything that I dislike or miss, except that we're not able to take everyone on Earth with us. We're not able to take our family and our friends with us. And that would, if we could, that would make it even more enjoyable.
Again, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. Good luck with your mission too.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for the questions, and thanks for joining us today.
Isn't that stuff just fascinating? Well, thank you again for taking the time to listen to this episode of What's on My Radar. Hopefully you learned a lot of cool things about outer space. We got a couple more great episodes heading your way, so make sure you keep tuning back, and we'll give you some more answers to some questions that you may have. Thanks, everybody.